now. Namaste everyone. I would request everyone to take their seats. I am Ayushi Jain from BluOne Ink, and I thank you all for taking the time out on a Friday evening and attending this event. This therefore speaks about the importance of the event, the book, and the subject. You all have gathered here for the book launch of Hindutva, Origin, Evolution and Future, authored by Sri Aravindan Neelakandan and published by BluOne Ink. At BluOne Ink, we are delighted and privileged to have been associated with the book and this author. We believe books open windows to the world and have the power to transform lives. BluOne Ink is an initiative to invoke, experience, share, and celebrate this power. To start the event, I would like to invite the dignitaries on the stage. I would first request Sri K. Annamalai to come on stage, please. Annamalai ji is an IPS officer, President Tamil Nadu BJP, and the author of the book Stepping Beyond Khaki. In 2020, Annamalai ji established We the Leaders Foundation and began working on it as its chief mentor. The organization promotes organic and modern agriculture technology among Indians. Thank you, Annamalai ji, for coming here. I would now request Tejasvi Suryaji to please come on stage. Parliament from Bangalore South constituency, having been elected of the 17th Lok Sabha at the age of just 28. He is also the national president of BJP's youth wing, Bharatiya Janata Yuva Morcha, since 2020. He owns an NGO, Arise India, working in the area of school education. Thank you, Tejasvi Suryaji, for being here. I would now request Dr. Makaran Paranzape ji to come on stage, please. Dr. Paranzape is a professor, writer, and poet. He has a PhD on the topic, Mysticism in India English Poetry. Dr. Paranzape was a teaching assistant at the University of Illinois, a lecturer at the University of Hyderabad, and an associate professor at IIT Delhi. He is currently serving as a professor of English at JNU and as a director of Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla. Thank you, Dr. Paranzape, for being here. I would request Abhinav Prakash to come on stage. Abhinav Prakash is National Vice President of Bharatiya Janata Yuva Morcha, Youth Wing of BJP, and a member of Central Team of Samajik Samvad, a focused Dalit outreach program of the BJP. Abhinav ji is an assistant professor of economics at the SRCC Delhi University. He is also a regular columnist in the Hindi and English various publications. Thank you for being here, sir. I would finally request our author, Aravindan Neelakandan, to come on stage, please. वैराग्य तेल संपूर्णे भक्तिवर्ती समन्विते प्रबोधपूर्ण पात्रे तु ज्ञाति दीपम विलोक्ये. Sanatan Dharma tells us the ultimate evolution of a person is to attain self-realization. Like the lamp burns bright, illuminating the area around it, a self-realized person shines bright with wisdom and knowledge, illuminating everyone around them. Deepam in the shlok symbolizes this self-realized person. With this thought, we light the lamp today to illuminate our surroundings with knowledge and wisdom. To commence the ceremony of lighting the lamp, I would now like to invite Gitanjali on stage. Gitanjali is a social entrepreneur actively engaged in working towards grassroots empowerment and education of women and children. She is also involved at BluOne Ink as an editor and designer. I would now request Sri Partho to please come on stage to give the opening statement. Partho is a teacher, poet, and writer. He writes extensively on Vedanta and integral education. He is the chief editor at BluOne Ink and a mentor to the BluOne Group.
Namaskar. So today is a very happy occasion for me because in a way it's a realization of two aspirations that I've held in my heart for many years. One is the journey of BluOne Ink. Very briefly I'll tell you about it. The other is the journey of this book, Hindutva, by Aravindan. BluOne Ink began as an aspiration many years ago. I was attending a very specialized conference at Oroville, conducted by a group of scholars and thinkers belonging to Sri Aravindan, the Sri Aravindan field. And we were discussing the question of Sri Aurobindo and nationalism. And so those of you who are familiar with Sri Aurobindo and especially his Uttarpada speech, Sri Aurobindo's categorical insistence on one fact, that with Sanatana Dharma, India shall arise. And if Sanatana Dharma is to perish, India shall perish. India as a civilization will perish. This was the leitmotif of that conference in Oroville, and a lot of animated discussions happened, and a lot of people questioned the appropriateness of nationalism and Sanatana Dharma in the context of a universalist like Sri Aurobindo. And they were very legitimate, very important, fundamental questions that were raised during that talk. And that was the first time that I came across the term Hindutva. And I was fortunate enough to be interacting with a very, very close student of Sitaram Goenji, and who was very much influenced by Sitaramji, and was perhaps, to my mind, among the first very proactive proponents of Hindutva as a philosophy. And that was the first time I questioned that, that this person who's been educated and brought up in India and amongst the best educational institutes in this country, how come I don't know anything about Hindutva? What is Hindutva? All I knew was what I was taught about Hindutva. Hindutva as the extremist wing of Hinduism, and don't get confused about it. Hinduism is this, Hindutva is that. You may be a Hindu, but Hindutva is the question, etc., etc., etc. For the first time, I wanted to understand Hindutva. And what just came to me out of probably Sri Aurobindo's writings and thoughts was the concept of Hindutva being the tattva of Hinduism. Hindutva, the tattva of being Hindu, the essence of being Hindu. What does it really mean to be a Hindu? What is the essence of Hinduism? That was the beginning of a quest. And my very, very close and dear friend Parikshit Singh, my cousin and friend Anirudh, and I, three of us began this journey. We discovered, we realized, acutely realized, the woeful lack of any kind of credible quality literature around the subject of Hinduism. There was nothing that we could get hand on that, and I wanted to study more about it. I had wanted at that time to organize several other conferences on the subject, because somewhere intuitively, perhaps, I realized this is going to be a very important subject for the years to come. And that was directly the reason why we established BluOne Ink as an initiative that we took for creating a platform that will give an articulate, an intelligent, passionate and articulate voice to Hindu Dharma and Hindutva. And then Aravindan happened. We met in Oroville again. Not a coincidence. We met once again in Oroville, and I came to know that Aravindan is working on Hindutva. He's written a book on Hindutva, an exhaustive analysis, and as the mother would will it, the book happened, and we were very, very happy that Aravindan agreed to give us the privilege of publishing the book. So it happened as our first aspiration of an important book on the subject of Hindutva. To my mind, it was very clear that Hindutva is going to be one of the most important thought revolutions of this century, of this decade for sure. Our nation, our society is at a very critical juncture where it is poised for another leap of thought and consciousness. And Hindutva, I am confident, deeply confident, is going to play a very, very significant role in this, in our journey. So, and then in Pondicherry, the Pondicherry Lit Fest, I don't know if you remember me. I heard him, Annamalai, speak at the Pondicherry Lit Festival, and I was almost like, I seldom get very enthusiastic about these things, perhaps age or whatever. But I was I gave him a standing ovation. And I came up to him, you won't remember. I shook him by the hand and I said, if you're the future of Indian politics, I am fulfilled, I am happy. And this was August. This was the first week of August, and I didn't know that I was going to be again on the same stage sharing it with him. So, very happy coincidence. And again, seeing you, there is a lot of new things happening, a lot of young people with the right thinking and the right articulation that are happening in our country today. And I wish to Sri Aravindan, I wish to the mother that this happens more and more. And we add light to light, illumination to illumination. And thank you very much, Aravindan for this singularly important contribution to Hindutva in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Bharata, for your opening statement. For the formal release of the book, I would request Aravindan Annamalai and Surya to step forth, please. I would request Annamalai and Surya to formally unveil the book.
Bharat Mata ki Jai!
Annamalai, I would request you to please present a copy of the book to Abhinav. Surya, I would request you to please present a copy of the book to Dr. Paranzape. We finally have launched Hindutva, Origin, Evolution and Future. We'll have a panel discussion followed by a Q&A. For the Q&A, our volunteers will be around to provide you a pen and a paper. I would request the audience to submit their questions to our volunteers around to facilitate an uninterrupted discussion. We shall now begin the panel discussion.
Good evening and welcome everyone. It was almost a month back I got a call from the Aravindan and asking me that please come to the book release function as the chief guest. And I asked him who else is the chief guest on the panel, and he said Tejasvi Surya ji and Annamalai ji. I said, well, I stepped down because the Virat Text writer to publish that. Aravindan was insistent that you have to be present and you have to be on the stage. Then I said, give me the role of a moderator, because let me make use of this opportunity to ask questions, not to do very erudite personalities, Dr. Lakan Paranjpe and Aravindan, but also to the rock star of Indian politics, that is Hindutra and Science. I congratulate you for this a very great endeavor, I would say. It's a very great intellectual endeavor, this book, Hindutva, its origin, its evolution and future. Hindutva, as you know, is one of the most powerful forces in the world today. No matter what our opponents say, no matter what different kinds of ideologies and interest groups claim Hindutva has, but Hindutva is one of the most potent socio-political religious movements in the world. And I'm very proud to be on the side of Hindutva throughout my life, and I think his work has brought great clarity to the entire concept. Now, I see Hindutva in a very simple term. I see primarily it as a socio-political phenomenon. It's basically the attempt by an older civilization, by an old society, to navigate the modern world, which is dominated by the nation state. So this is an argument for nationhood of the people of this land who are Hindus. Second thing is the expression of Hindu modernity. And third, I see it as a political response to political Islam and political colonization by the Western world. These are my three different points of defining Hindutva. But I must say that Aravindan sir, your book has brought a completely new dimension to the concept of Hindutva's origin and its evolution. So I'd like to start with you first, asking you to give a broad overview of your thesis, how you define Hindutva, especially this our first point of that Hinduism is just a subset of Hindutva. So Hindutva is bigger than even Hinduism. So over to you, sir.
Thank you very much for that question. I feel like a student who has written his thesis and sitting in Viva, but only it is with such great people. And actually, I am nervous. Most probably, you can see that. Well, to me, Hindutva is a process. Not to me, actually. Actually, this was discovered by Aravindan Neelakandan. He was the first person to use this in terms of civilizational. He saw Hindutva as a civilizational process that defines India. And then Savarkar saw it in even a more holistic manner, and he said that Hindutva is a process that subsumes all other streams of national life. And based on this, I was looking at Hindutva. This is the format, this is the framework. Was looking at Hindutva. And then I discovered something that Dr. Hendeva, when he was founding the RSS, he had said something like, the sun is going to infuse life and energy into all streams of all walks of life of the nation. So I took all this together and I went into the literature and I discovered that Hindutva is a very primordial process of consciousness. And it is in India that it has reached the zenith, and it has vitalized this nation whenever this nation has been threatened. And it has been sustaining the national life by allowing theodiversity to flourish in this nation. So this is the basis of the book, and I have looked into the socio-political process, the process of building institutions, how we do science, and how we engage in a civilizational process with the theodiversity of humanity. The theodiversity of humanity is almost infinite. And Hindutva is the only process that has been engaging itself in a creative way with this theodiversity without allowing itself to be taken over by monopolistic expansionism. So that is the essence of the book. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before we move on to question and answer in different, on different issues, let me come to Tejasvi ji and ask for his opening remarks of your overview of the book and how do you see this book?
Thank you so much, Abhinav ji. Good evening to everybody. It's a very important event that all of us are part of today. Because the book itself is going to be a landmark in the way we understand Hindutva today, and it will also serve a very important historical purpose in as much as in the coming generations, in the coming years, this is a book that a lot of scholars, academics, politicians, and anybody who wants to understand and study Hindutva from a very neutral and an objective perspective will come back to it repeatedly. Given the fact that over the last so many decades, both domestically as well as at international levels, Hindutva has been unjustifiably derided with twisted logic, with spin doctors peddling an agenda. There is great need that more and more work with great scholarship, backed with research, backed with facts, come so as to dispel the myths, the vested propaganda that has been so, in a manner of sorts, in an industrial scale, attempted in the last so many decades. So, at the very outset, I want to thank, on behalf of all of you, on behalf of a lot of young people especially, because the audience of this book is primarily going to be today's generation and the coming generation. I want to thank Aravindan ji for this really very scholarly, very erudite book on Hindutva, its origin, and also most importantly, its future. Perhaps there are almost 100 pages of just reference material that Aravindan ji has given in the book in the last 100 pages, which goes to show the painstaking research that he has done to produce a book of this kind. The book is voluminous, not just in size. Annamalai ji was outside just jokingly asking Aravindan ji if he has transferred all his weight to the book. That is the kind of effort that Aravindan ji has put behind this. I of course haven't had the opportunity to go through the whole book, though I have made attempts to read as much as I could. There are 3-4 important areas where Aravindan ji has made very original contribution. One is his very effective, very fact-based rebuttal of the false charges that have been imposed on Hindutva. For example, the Hindutva movement was characterized falsely as a racist movement. Aravindan ji does a phenomenal job of rebutting this charge by not only scripturally quoting how the universal consciousness is the basis of the Hindu philosophy, but he also historically points out how even before India gained independence, Hindu Sanghatanist leaders like Dr. Khare were the ones who led the anti-racist movements in favor of Indians in South Africa, and how it was the Hindu leaders even before independence who made sure that India, pre-independent India, put up a strong fight against racism, not just in domestic India but also at important international forums like the United Nations. In the same way, questions of Akhand Bharat, which the opponents of this ideology describe as a geographical imperialistic idea, has also been effectively addressed. So has issues of cow worship and cow slaughter. Also, the most important and very highly contested idea of caste and birth-based discrimination, which has been used by the leftists and the Marxists as a knife to puncture 100 wounds in the Indian society, has also been very clearly established right from the study of Swami Shraddhanand to Ambedkar to Savarkar to the whole Hindu Sanghatan response to caste. So these are some things that which are really impressive in the book. The other point that Aravindan ji makes is also very interesting, is about Hindutva and science. Something that, as somebody who has grown up reading Swami Vivekananda and Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo and Swami Vivekananda have been the greatest proponents of understanding Hindu philosophy and its ideas from the prism of science and modernity. So the argument that Aravindan ji makes of how Hindutva can be a worldview or consciousness which will lead us all into a more scientific, more rational based, more scientific world, and thereby Hindutva will also be is not just a thing, a relic of the past, but is a very living consciousness, a very living worldview which is going to catalyze us into a more prosperous and a more modern future. I think through all of these very original ideas and contribution, Aravindan ji has done a great service to the cause of Hindutva, to dispel myths, to put forth the real facts, and also give it original insight in terms of what it can offer in the future. This, I think, Abhinavji, is a very important contribution in today's times. On behalf of a very grateful young generation, I want to thank Aravindan ji for the great contribution he has made. Thank you so much,
He asked for your opening remarks on the book, and especially the very fact that you come from Tamil Nadu, where we are at the front line of the ideological war, a very radical version of Dravidian ideology. How do you see this work and this contribution to the public discourse?
Thank you, Abhinavji, and it's a great occasion here to be with Aravindan Neelakandan ji. I would call him as the best original Dharmic Tamil writer alive, as of today. It's not very easy for Aravindan ji coming from Tamil Nadu, and many a time he is fighting a very lonely fight. His fights are always lonely, but he still has taken the mantle upon himself, writes books after books, gives thoughts after thoughts in Swarajya magazine, and I'm very happy to see the book has reached the capital city, Delhi, with the eminent audience here. Professor is here, Bharat Professor is here, my dear friend Tejasvi Surya is here, and some of the best intellectuals are sitting here. And coming from Tamil soil, 70 years, the way it was twisted. If you enter to Tamil Nadu now, if you ask me, the most abused word, the current political lexicon in Tamil Nadu, I would use the word called Sanatana Dharma. Every single politician in Tamil Nadu, mostly from the DMK side, every day they'll at least use the word called Sanatana Dharma a couple of times. Sanatana Dharma is going to enter Tamil Nadu, please stop. Sanatana Dharma is already here, please stop. If you catch one guy, you ask him, can you explain what is this Sanatana Dharma to be? And even if he will say, no, Sanatana Dharma means the upper caste trying to dominate the lower caste. Sanatana Dharma means somebody, that Aryans trying to invade the Indians. Nobody has got a real clue about what Sanatana Dharma is. And because this is what it was taught to them over the last 70 odd years, the textbooks have made it, people have given awards after awards in Tamil soil, and that has become like an institutional memory for 3-4 generations. So the book is very heavy because he has got a lot of heavy load lifting to do, because he has to break a lot of myth. And honestly speaking, after he has sent me the soft copy, I carried a printout of that. Everywhere I used to carry in my car or somewhere in the last 15 days, people ask me, what is that you are carrying? Why is it such a big book? Because I printed that to read it. And the way he has dissected it, he has entered into it, like our friend Tejasvi Surya ji said, historical arguments, he has built counter arguments to that. And very fascinating for me from the book is the comparison to science. We all know Hindutva is closer to nature. It's more a sense of evolution. Anything that is closer to nature has to obey the laws of science. Without obeying the laws of science, nobody can be closer to nature. For example, if you look at me, I've taken a Sabarimala Viratham. So I'm wearing a dhoti, I'm in the process of undertaking a certain penance, and I'm going through a certain mandala. So this is Hindutva for me. I was waiting for somebody to connect all these dots and present it to this generation of audience, the young people here, the way it should be presented. He has done it very accurately here. 48 days. Sabarimala, we follow a mandala because every 48 days your whole cell gets regenerated. That is the law of science. And why do you undertake a penance in a certain way? There is science to it. Why do you take a coconut with you? There is a science to it. But this was in a way called a pseudoscience because we were never given the scientific angle to it, the laws of nature angle to it. So here, he has done a great job of building all these arguments together. That is the biggest takeaway from the book for whatever I've read it now, till now. And second, especially for Tamil audience, when I hope and pray Aravindan Neelakandan that you very soon translate this into regional language because it's very important. And translating this into regional language is going to take this to a much further set of audience because they have to understand this is not something that is being propagated by one political party within quotes BJP or by one organization within quotes RSS or by certain individuals within quotes XYZ. This is there for centuries. Only now we are trying to put words to it, trying to put a mala to it to a larger audience to say this ideology, this philosophy is much closer to nature. That is what the biggest takeaway for me from this book. Thank you.
Now we come to my fellow jailwite and a jailing survivor, Dr. Bharat Mata. Sir, your opening remarks on the book.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Thank you, Aravindan. It's such a pleasure and privilege to be in this distinguished panel with our author of the evening, Aravindan ji, whom I've known for at least a decade, and Annamalai ji, and of course, our young star from Bangalore, and also a Bangalore boy, Tejasvi Surya ji. So, I want to start by saying that this is an extraordinary book. In fact, there is no book like this at all available in India when it comes to the subject of Hindutva. So I want to concur with and second what we've heard so far, but add a few things, okay? First of all, let us remember that, coming back to Tamil Nadu, sir, today they want to say that Rajaraja Chola, who was the builder of the Tanjavur temple, the Brihadishwara temple, one of the grandest temples in India, is not a Hindu, is not a Sanatani. We have come to such a twisted sense of who we are that a rational, well-argued book, which is an exposition, of our own identity, was the need of the hour. So, my first point is, let's understand how this book functions. I think it functions at least at three levels. First of all, it is an exposition of Hindutva, what Hindutva means. Second, which is also very important in my view, it is a redefinition of Hindutva. Okay? And third, what the book does, I think it is so inclusive, it is so ambitious, I want to link it to what Annamalai ji said, is that it argues that Hindutva is foundational to the very future of humanity. I'll tell you how it makes this point. In a way, it makes this point by saying it's close to nature. So I want to echo what you said, but if you look at the conclusion of the book, it's a very short conclusion for a very long book. So you can look at the conclusion first, but the very last line of the book, I want you to draw your attention to that last line. And Aravindan ji says, finally, Hindutva represents theodiversity. Okay, theodiversity. This is a term taken from Lokesh Chandra ji, but I was looking for the first usage of the book. It's not there in the references very clearly, so a second edition needs a few corrections, but that's the teacher in me speaking. So excuse that. But in that way, Hindutva is also the future of intelligent life on this planet. This is a huge claim. Hindutva is the future of intelligent life on this planet. To understand this, you have to not only read his chapter on science, but to go back to the ideas of the bicameral brain. But fundamentally, you can look at the Chandogya Upanishad also, which is that humanity, all our organs and senses also represent the fights the fight between the Devas and the Asuras. So every sense is contaminated. With your eyes, you can see both good and evil. With your ears, you can hear both good and evil. With your mouth, you can speak both good and evil. With your tongue, you can taste both good and evil. With your hands and fingers or whatever, you can touch both good and evil. And finally, with the mind, you can think both good and evil. Now, if you link that to what Aravindan talks about, which is the supramentalization of human consciousness, then the whole link becomes clear. In other words, humanity is at a crossroads today. And we have to consciously decide which side we want to belong. Do you want to belong to the Devi side, to the side of the shining ones, to the side of those who want to pledge their lives for higher consciousness? Or do you want to go towards those who are trying to destroy this planet, destroy each other, divide each other? And it's not just about Hindus and non-Hindus or so-called Dravidians. You've got a whole chapter about how this whole thing was invented. You know, we are all one. Our DNA shows we are one. And the fact is we are one because of this so-called Arya Dharma, Dharma of the noble people. The noble people are those who have chosen higher consciousness. Okay, that's all it is. It doesn't matter who you are, what race you belong to, what region of the world you belong to. So Hindutva is not the exclusive preserve of Bharatiyas either. It's actually an invitation. This is his argument. You may or may not agree with it, and I'm sure that since it's such a political term, his ever widening and inclusive argument is not going to be accepted by some people, right? So, but if you look at theodiversity, I'm sure people from all sides of the political spectrum will see it as a defining feature of India. Pluralism, theodiversity, and the fact, I mean, one of the very important contributions, going back to what Abhinavji said, is that Hindutva here is not seen as an ideology. It's not even seen as a political movement. Okay? It is seen as a process which is eternal, which is going on all the time. In other words, it's seen as a tattva. And here is where I want to point to one or two important things before we go into the discussion. I think Tejasviji said, and even Partho, my dear friend, said that it's a very important time for India. It's a very important time for humanity. I couldn't agree more. It's very important even from the point of view of various anniversaries. India at 75, Aravindan at 150. But don't forget, Savarkar's Hindutva at 100 next year, 1923. 100 years of Savarkar's essay, which has been demonized. People don't even read it. This book is the best defense of Hindutva that you can have. So it's an exposition, it's a redefinition, and it is a defense. But as I said, more important than that, Aravindan links Hindutva to human consciousness itself, to the evolution of human consciousness itself. So remember the anniversary of Savarkar's essay, 100th anniversary. Another very important anniversary is coming up. There are friends here who will appreciate the 100th anniversary of the founding of the RSS, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. 1925. So this book is the best possible contribution, tribute to all these anniversaries which are coming up. And let's not forget, what Aravindan does by way of his methodology. He widens Hindutva, not only going back to Chandranath Basu's book, Hindu Tattva or Hindutva, but he's bringing in Tilak, he's bringing in Bankim, and don't forget he's bringing in Tagore. How many people know in this audience that Tagore wrote an essay called Hindutva? In fact, in the Vishwabharati complete works of Tagore, they changed the title because Hindutva is such a bad word, you can't use this word. And they called it Bharat Samaj, Bharat Samaj. They changed the title. But This is Tagore's essay. Why should we translate this essay all over again? And he's bringing in all these other very important thinkers, Sri Aurobindo, Swami Vivekananda, and he's linking them all to this broad stream of thought, which he calls Hindutva, which is in a way co-evil, okay, not EVI, but it evolves with Sanatana Dharma itself, what you said, Anamalaji. So, wherever you talk about Hindutva, please remember you're talking actually about Sanatana Dharma, as Sri Aurobindo said in his Uttarpara speech. And the last point I want to make, Abhinavji is very anxious to bring us into a conversation mode, which I completely agree, is this chapter on science. Okay? This book is by and large a defense, but once in a while, Aravindan is also waving some red flags. In this audience, and all of us who want to be modern people, we must remember the distinction between science, non-science. Okay? Non-science means there are a lot of things that science does not consider. They are not a part of the purview of science. They are not a part of the scientific investigations as yet. Okay, so scientific methodology hasn't been able to catch them, and that includes consciousness. Science is trying to capture consciousness. It's called the hard problem of consciousness. So there's science and non-science, but there's also pseudoscience. Okay, like ancient Indians had rockets. It's a very good idea. They had nuclear weapons. That's the Brahmastra. Okay, they had aeroplanes. A lot of people believe in this. So I ask very simple questions. If they had an aeroplane, they need fuel, and they need a motor. Can you show me a part of a motor of an ancient plane? I ask questions like this, which makes me unpopular. But we need to ask these questions because Hindutva is not about pseudoscience. And certainly, it is not about nonsense. So there's science, non-science, pseudoscience, and then nonsense. Okay? So what I'm trying to say is that a lot of things which are non-science should be investigated. Okay? And I really want to again come back to one point that Anamalaji made, which I think is really important. See, Hindutva, which is a tattva or Sanatana Dharma, is not about books. Books are very important. Okay? It's not a shastra. Okay? It's not an ideology. It is about lived experience. If you go on a 40-day Sabarimalai Vrat, a vow, you are going to be transformed. Something will happen to your body, something will happen to your mind, something will happen to your emotional self, something will happen to your ecological identity with the rest of the world, something will happen to your emotional makeup. Hindutva or Sanatana Dharma or Bharatiyata is not a bunch of ideas. It is a lived experience. It is practice. It is orthopraxis. It is not orthodoxy. So, when all of us practice rather than just sit down and argue, I come from JNU, somebody's talking about caste, there's very bad slogans on JNU walls just now. Okay? Even as I speak, they were painted last night. Nobody knows who did it. But we can't allow these kinds of slogans to divide us because we have to experience what this civilization is. Bharat is a laboratory of consciousness, my friends. And this is the gist of Aravindan's book. It is not an ideology. It is an invitation to all the denizens of this planet to try to enter into a practice whereby you can transform yourself, transform society, transform consciousness, and indeed save humanity. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And in your chapter on Bharat Mata, Vande Mataram, and Bharat, you actually point out to a very, very unique phenomenon in India's civilization history. That whenever there is this stress on the Indian civilization that is, whenever you have the India being threatened, you have this very unique, very curious phenomenon of the emergence of the goddess and the imagery of the goddess which is coming to the front. So you talk about when the Mughal Empire was reaching its peak. You have the spread of the Tantra movement, the Shakta movement, especially in Bengal, which became the basis of the resistance to the Islamic movement. When you talk about the Karnataka, Vijayanagar kingdom, the poem by Ganga, Princess Ganga Devi Madhura Vijay, it's a goddess which comes and gives the Shastra to Kumar Kampanna to go and destroy the Madurai Sultanate. When you talk about the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, then again the same thing happens. Then the goddess appears and gives a sword to Maharaj, and they go and fight against the Turkish rule and the Mughal rule. Same thing happened with the Rani Hindu. Same thing happens in the Punjab. That when the Sikh and the Khalsa are at great stress, then Guru Gobind Singh Ji writes Chandi Ka Vaar, invoking the goddess. So this is a very unique kind of, this is the first time I've noticed it, thanks to your writing, a very unique socio-regio-cultural phenomenon. That whenever India is under stress, you have the emergence of the divine feminine in a very aggressive form. Similar with the colonial experience, when the British are absolute masters of India, the overbearing power of the British Empire, the industrial power, the intellectual power, the power of academia, the Christianity and everything, it then seems that everything is now over. The Hindu elites are converting in mass to Christianity. Then suddenly you have the emergence of the Bharat Mata. And whole India goes with the Vande Mataram, almost like a religious prayer. Could you explain this phenomenon, because you have also said this thing that very unique Hindu contribution is the Samanvaya. When you transition from the pre-Aryanese to the Aryanese societies, and the basis of the Samanvaya is also divine feminine.
So this idea of the goddess who comes and fights for Dharma. Actually, I discovered it in Silapadika. So in Tamil literature, you have 5 biocultural zones. They are the mountain and forest, they form one zone. And you have Skanda or Muruga as the god of the deity of that zone. And then you have ocean. Naturally, Varna is the deity of the ocean, and ocean-related communities, Varna is the deity. Makes sense. Then you have the grassland, the grazing land, and communities related to that. And there you have Krishna as the presiding deity. That also makes sense. And in the farming communities, in the agricultural land, Indra is the presiding deity. That also makes sense. In the desert land, the goddess is the main deity. Now, that doesn't make sense actually, because if you take Western anthropology, the goddess is supposed to be the fertilizer or the goddess of fertility, right? So, whenever you are whenever you are doing fertility rituals, then the goddess comes. So, how can goddess be the presiding deity of desert? Then Chirapadikam explains that a desert is usually in a tropical land like India. It is the forest land and the grazing land, they get degraded because of the mismanagement of the rulers or the people, and they become deserts. So when such a degradation happens, then there the fierce fighting goddess arises. In fact, this is also seen in the Vedic literature, where Niriti is she is a fierce goddess. And of course, the Indology said that this goddess should be a non-Aryan goddess. No. Actually, this fierce goddess emerges when Rita is disturbed. When there is Niriti, then this goddess emerges. So this goddess is the primordial goddess. The fierce form of goddess. She is another face of another side of the same Prithvi, another side of the same pleasant goddess. But she emerges because the Rita is disturbed. And the Rita can be disturbed at several levels, not only ecological, but it can also be disturbed at the theodiversity level. So here, when theodiversity is disturbed by the monopolistic expansionism, what we call conversions, attacks on a particular religion, imposing one's own religion on all the people, when that happens, then the deeper Rita is disturbed. Then the goddess naturally emerges. That is what has been brought out in this book completely.
But I think that is one of the most important chapters to read in this book because the Bharat Mata is always ridiculed. In the intellectual discourse, it is kind of shown as a very modern idea or something. But this chapter actually brings that is the manifestation, the manifestation of the collective aspirations of India throughout the ages. Right? A very fierce, protective goddess, the Bhavani. But in your book, you point out that India always rises up in 5-star. When the diversity is threatened, when we is faced with monopolizing ideologies or monopolistic relations, right? And one of the charges against Hindutva, this question goes to you, that it is a homogenizing force. Hindutva wants to impose uniformity on the people. It wants to destroy the cultural diversity that Ganga, Jamni, Tehzeeb kind of thing in India. So how do you see Hindutva and how do you respond to this charge of Hindutva being a force of uniformity?
If there is something that is at the very central core of Hindutva, it is its diversity and its acceptance of everybody and everything as a part of the same universal consciousness. Just when Annamalai was mentioning about his Sabrimala Vrata and pointed at his dhoti, I was thinking, I come from Karnataka, he comes from Tamil Nadu. In Karnataka, we wear the dhoti and in exactly the opposite way that he wears it. So when we wear the dhoti in Karnataka, the stripes should come on the left. In Kerala and in some parts of Tamil Nadu, they wear it in exactly the opposite way where the stripe comes on the right. So the change, the diversity which starts from something as simple as this, extends to even drive debates of philosophy. Many a times, Abhinavji, I feel that most of the charges that are leveled against Hindutva or Hinduism is always by those people who have never practiced living as a Hindu. If you actually go outside of, say, 100 kilometers outside of Delhi or outside of any urban setting and interact with or speak with a common Hindu, maybe a village peasant, he never has any of these ideas of homogenization, uniformity, or any of these things. He is not confused because he is living the life of a Hindu. So it's only those people who have stopped living the life of a Hindu who gets confused with all of these theories which are made by professors sitting in AC chambers. Having said that, even when you look at the practices that are there in the Hindu fold, the way Shiva is practiced and worshipped varies among different Shaiva sects in the country. Coming from the south, the way the priests chant Veda mantras in the south is very different from how the Veda mantras are chanted in the north. There are certain temples in India, like Sabrimala, which is at the center of a debate for exclusion of a certain gender. There are also certain temples in India, certain practices in India which are exclusively to be carried out only by the females. So, never in our history has there been a debate or a resistance put forth by people to resist some kind of an imposition, like the kind that we are now witnessing in Iran. So, whether it comes to our clothing, whether it comes to our food choices, whether it comes to our modes of worship, whether it comes to our languages, whether it comes to our gods, the very essence of this philosophy, to use a modern technical term, we have always functioned under an open architecture. So the very concept of Ishtadevata, let me give a very small example, Abhinavji. This happened just when I was growing up, of how Hindu dharma actually works. There was this bus stand near my house where I was catching, where I would catch the bus to go to school. So just next to the bus stand was a typical auto rickshaw stand. And there was almost 10, 12 auto rickshaw union people, etc., who would always stand there, have a chai, etc., wait for the passengers. There was a monkey that would visit and play with the auto rickshaw drivers. Occasionally, they would give it a biscuit or a chai or buy it some kind of a fruit or something. So it had somehow kind of become a part of the larger auto rickshaw drivers' family. One day the monkey passed away, and when it did, naturally the auto rickshaw drivers who were assembled there, they buried it in the auto stand, just next to the auto stand. And a couple of weeks later, one or two auto rickshaw drivers put a couple of bricks on top of the burial. And on the next week, somebody else came and painted a saffron coating on that. The week after that, there were some flowers. And a week after that, there were people who started coming and putting agarbatti and started praying. And all of us kids who would go to school, especially when we had exams, we would go near what is now became a Hanuman temple. We would now go there and pray and then go to attend our exams. This is a lived experience as a Hindu. Now what the dry intellectual does is he takes away the emotion from all of this. Now he questions the whole practice of revering the monkey and making and seeing Hanuman in the monkey as pseudoscience, as even as irrational, as superstition, and all of these things. But neither the practicing Hindu auto rickshaw driver nor a student like me who went there and prayed, for us, none of these were a matter of debates. So the very concept of Ishta Devata, creating your own God, the idea of respecting and accepting all of these diversities, this is something that is central to Hindu philosophy. We must not confuse unity to be uniformity and diversity to be discrimination.
That's a very important point, and one of the charges against the Hindutva, especially in Tamil Nadu and Navarai, is that Hindutva is against social justice. It wants to justify and perpetuate discrimination in the name of diversity. So how do you respond to this charge of the BJP being anti-social justice, which is labeled by the religious parties against you?
Abhinav, I think he has addressed parts of it in this book. If you look at the Dravidian movement, 1970, it started as a backward classes movement, then it morphed into a DK movement, then 1949 DMK as a party came into existence. If you look at the history per se, they say, look, the temple entry movement was started by us. It is some ideologue of Dravidian movement who enabled the people of all particular caste to go to a temple. So we are for social justice. But if you look at the available evidence, in fact, I'm sure Aravindan Neelakandan would very soon be writing a book on this, covering all the humbugs of whatever they have said. But if you look at the history per se, the people who fought at certain points of time for everybody should enter into temples, have a darshan of the God. If you take 10 people collectively, if there is one Periyar among the 10, I can show there are 9 people who practice Hindutva among the 10. But what happened conveniently one name got popped up among the set of 10, and a big brand building exercise happened for that particular person year after year. Then 67 they came to power, then the textbooks after textbooks started glorifying. Then we are in 2022 now. Then they have taken, in Hindi we say kabja, they have completely kabja'd the concept of social justice. They say it is we who did it, nobody did it. But if you look at the history, I can show you this 90% people are practicing properly. Now he quotes Mahatma Gandhi extensively here, the book also. Now what is Mahatma Gandhi's view of untouchability? What is Gandhi's view of temple entry movement at different points of time? At the RSS view, he takes BJP's view. If you look at it at different points of time, BJP as a party, Jansanghh as a party, we were for social justice. Now I am talking as a party, Karyakarta, party person. But only thing in Tamil Nadu, a narrative was allowed to be set by them at different points of time because the party had a very negligible presence. And even Sri Chakravarti Rajagopalachari was running a political party at that point of time. With the Congress he came out, he had the Swatantra party. And he stood for a lot of things which we can also call Rajagopalachari as the original Hindutva. If we go by Rajagopalachari, what he has done and many things. But again, conveniently, they have taken parts of Rajagopalachari, what he has said. Again, they branded Rajagopalachari as an anti-social justice guy. But conveniently, first time when DMK came to power, they aligned again with Rajagopalachari in 1967. When DMK and Swatantra party, they went together to face election. It's a very confused history, sir. A very confused history. And just very convenient history they have written for themselves. I'm just hoping and praying the next book of Aravindan Neelakandan is on this. Just this humbug. You take one social justice movement. You start with who started, who propagated it, who reached a conclusion. Then finally, when the last is enough, maybe there is invariably one day will come and say it is high rooted. So I'm sure it's a matter of time before the original history comes out.
Just want to bring what Annamalai said, something that the book brilliantly makes. Who was Swami Shraddhananda? Was he a member of the Communist Party? But he was one of the most sincere champions of the movement against untouchability. Who was Savarkar? He was somebody who is diametrically opposed to the JNU left. He, Dr. Ambedkar says, made as significant a contribution towards the Dalit cause as much as Gautam Buddha did. If you look at the response of the Hindu society towards untouchability, social justice movements, whether it is in Tamil Nadu or whether it is Maharashtra, Karnataka, whichever part of the country, you will always realize that the greatest reform movements within the Hindu fold has always come from somebody who is sympathetic to the Hindu cause. It has not ever come from somebody who has wanted to destroy the very Hindu system, Hindu philosophy, Hindu consciousness itself. So I think this is a point that the book makes very vehemently and something that has to be appreciated, especially in the context of, say, Tamil Nadu and Kerala. Narayan Guru, Phule, all of these people, they were all Hindu people who were sympathetic to the Hindu cause and who brought these reforms within the Hindu religion.
But that's a fair point. If you look at the Rajamanjri Pact or the Pune Pact, if you look at the people who signed it, it's basically the Hindu right of that time which just signed those things and gave the representation to the different communities of those times. But if you look at the history, you talk about Savarkar and Dr. Ambedkar. When the Dr. Ambedkar was launching Mahat Satyagraha, which is a civic rights satyagraha, asking for equal rights for the Dalits to draw water from well and village ponds, Gandhi opposed it, called it a Duragraha. But Savarkar issued a statement in favor of it. So you see, the Savarkar is always stood with the core demands of the social justice movement, and the wider Hindutva family has also done the same. So how do you see this discourse of Savarkar versus Ambedkar? Because how I see it is that both of them ultimately are arguing for the same thing. The differences is because of their different social location and how they are approaching the problem.
Just for me?
Yes.
Abhinavji, you said Ambedkar versus Savarkar. So see, maybe it's the residual genuine in you making this versus. Because if you try to understand the communist philosophy, the Marxist philosophy, it has always tried in its very core to pitch two things as opposed to each other. And that's the very central philosophy of the whole Marxist. It's the capitalist versus the labor. It's man versus wife. It is student versus teacher. So as long as they keep a conflict alive, they can peddle their agenda. So it is not Ambedkar versus Savarkar, it is Ambedkar and Savarkar, because both of them essentially. And I think my very initial thoughts on this, I must thank Aravindan ji, because I think 4 or 5 years ago he had written a series on the very same subject in Swarajya, where I read and formulated my very initial opinions. Take the case of caste, birth-based discrimination. Ambedkar and Savarkar are on the same page and say birth-based discrimination does not find sanction, does not find a place either scripturally or theologically in the Indian philosophical setup. The very definition of the word Hindu, where Savarkar defines Hindu to mean to include everybody other than those practicing Abrahamic religions, was something that was in toto accepted and also codified by Ambedkar, not just in the Hindu code bill, but also in the Constitution of India. On the question of, say, martial races, both Ambedkar and Savarkar advocated for martial races in India to join the British Army so that the systematic demilitarization, demartialization of the Hindu races comes to an end. Even on economic front, both Savarkar and Ambedkar were in favor of industrialization and urbanization, because both of them viewed it as a very important catalyzing force to bring modernity into Hindu culture, Hindu society. So if you look at the issue of social ideas, whether it is economic ideas, whether it is political ideas, whether it is even technical definitions of who constitutes a Hindu, who does not constitute a Hindu, I think Savarkar and Ambedkar have very similar views, and I think both of them can be hailed as the paragons of modern day Hindutva, and both should be celebrated in that sense.
Let me just make a very political statement, and Ambedkar is the flag bearer of Hindutva. I think that made the news and the controversy will see. But Dr. Baranjpe, how do you see this Savarkar versus Ambedkar in the Jainoism versus Gandhi debate? Because Gandhi was largely a social orthodox. And when we talk about the Hindutva movement, I would say there are 3 strands in the entire movement. One is the radical strand of Savarkar, one is a more of a conservative strand of the RSS. Conservative in the sense that they do not agree with the rapid changes in society, they want society to have its own pace. And then you have a social orthodox, which is largely represented by Gandhi and other people. So how do you see these 3 strands in the
So this is quite a complex question, but I want to simplify it. I don't think of Gandhi as representing social orthodoxy. So this will call for another debate, but certainly he was not as radical as Ambedkar or as Savarkar. But I do not see him as an upholder of social orthodoxy. But the really important point is Gandhi repeatedly said he was a Sanatani Hindu. And I think that will be the point of entry into this debate. But the thing I wanted to say here is that we have to go from negative Ambedkarism to positive Ambedkarism. What is negative Ambedkarism? Negative Ambedkarism is the marshalling of identity politics in a very divisive and, should I say, anti-Indian way. Whereas Ambedkar was a pillar of India. He framed the constitution. And even if he criticized, Hindu beliefs which were prevalent, he always says, you see the end of annihilation of caste. He said, if any caste Hindu wants to improve Hindu society, I'll be very happy to help it. So we have to reread Ambedkar. And in fact, I'm doing a series called Hindutva and Swaraj, where I want to bring these figures into dialogue with each other. But I know there are many questions. I just wanted to say a couple of things to some of the very interesting points that have come up. The first thing is about Bharat Mata. Okay, what Aravindan ji said, he's referring to the Tolkappiyam and the five Chennai, the five landscapes. You know, this is a very important work of poetic imagination coming from the Tamil country. It is, I think, as important in a way as Bharata's Natya Shastra. We have to all read it. In a way, Ramanujan talked about it in his book called The Interior Landscape. But Shilapati Karam, you know, Kannagi is the heroine. I just want to bring this up because she tears her breast when she thinks the king has committed an injustice. And we think the injustice is only about her husband. No, it's much deeper. And Mathura is destroyed. There's a flood, and Umbuhar, that ancient civilization, is completely destroyed. And the temple to Kannagi is actually in Kerala because the Tamilians are so afraid of her. You know, I mean the power of Shakti when she's angry. Now this is very important. How you know, there's the Komal as well as the Ugra roop of every deity. You know, and every deity in India is armed. So this is the big problem with Gandhi. You know, his extremist non-violence, you know, has to be questioned. But to come back to Bharat Mata, let's not forget the first image of Bharat Mata was by Abanindranath. So I want to tie it up with the attacks on Hindutva, the homogenizing. It is the critics who homogenize. I was in a conference which was trying to come up with a counter to the New Jersey Rutgers conference on dismantling Hindutva. And one of the points I said is you can't dismantle Hindutva because it is so varied. There are as many definitions of Hindutva as there are people, as there are Hindutvites. And if you think that the Sangh Parivar is homogeneous, it is not homogeneous. There's a huge diversity of opinions. Okay, there are Savarkarites, there are people who are Gandhians, there are social democrats in it, you know, there are Netaji advocates. So, you know, the diversity, not just the theodiversity, but the social diversity, the political diversity, the ideological diversity, the intellectual diversity of India is also reflected in the Sangh Parivar. So, the homogenizing is by the critics because they think you can homogenize something and then destroy it easily. So we have to put the shoe on the other foot as it were. And this is where the countering, the intellectual countering, even in Tamil Nadu, I think of the appropriation that the DK, DMK people did. This has to be pointed out because we have to go back to Ramanuja, who started the social reform movement. All groups were included. You know, there are different kinds of Iyagars if you go into the history of it. But these stories are suppressed because you're trying to create an anti-Hindi or an anti-Brahmanical or an anti-this or an anti-that. Because nothing unites people as much as anti-something. And this is what, you know, Tejasviji was saying, that conflict is at the root of Marxian dialectical materialism. And why it hasn't worked in India, thankfully, and Partho will appreciate it, my friend, because Indian society seeks harmony, samanvaya, as he says in the book, not conflict. If you have an ideology which is entirely centered on conflict, it is not going to thrive in India. So, what we need in India is social evolution, but consciousness revolution. Because you can do it on your own, you can change your consciousness. And it doesn't bring you into conflict with anybody. You know, your wife can be a Vaishnavite, you can be a Shakta or a Shaivite, and someone else can worship Hanuman. You know, this is what Samarth Ramdas did. When they said, you can't build a temple, he said, I don't need a temple. Paint any stone red or orange and I'll have my Hanuman there. So these are Shaktis, these are powers, and this is across the board. This happens throughout Indic systems, which you said, Abhinavji. And the more you're in denial, the more you're cutting off your own roots. And as you all said, and now we can go to the questions, but you know, reform has to be, and is possible only when you respect the matrix of a culture, of a civilization. If you want to destroy the matrix of a civilization, then reform is not possible. So monothetic, monopolistic, even theistic, mono-ideological, this is actually, Aravindan says, is not just against Sanatan Dharma, etc. It's against humanity. It's against plurality. It's against our right to be different. Okay? And I think that is the way we have to approach this question. Not from an embattled, embarrassed or defensive space, but from an inclusive and celebratory space of what this culture stands for. And I think that this book shows you that, Aurobindo work shows you that, Swami Vivekananda shows you that, and this tremendous, if not pure diversity, the political diversity of the independence movement shows you that. They debated with each other, they disagreed with each other, but they all wanted Bharat Mata to be free. And let's not forget Bankim, who created, who brought this new goddess into the pantheon in Anandamata and even before with this separate poem, Vande Mataram.
Great, sir. And now let's move on to the question and answers by the audience. We have this question for you, Annamalai-ji. This is by Kapil Negi. And I think I should extend this question to you as well, because this is a very political kind of question. How do you think that Hindutva, basically is asking how Hindutva will be important when it comes to the international relation in the globalized world, and especially when you see the happenings in UK, Canada, even Australia and US, the Hindus are being counted by labeling them as Hindutvawadis. So how do you project Hindutva, explain Hindutva, and how important will it be in international relations?
Vinodji, I will tell you a historical fact that is hidden now, and many of us might not even know it has happened. To just trace the roots of when we got the independence, what exactly happened with respect to the dharma that is expected of a king. When India was about to be given the independence, there was a big discussion between Lord Mountbatten and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru how the transfer of power should happen. Because normally when, like a king, when a prime minister takes over a country, is there a symbolism by which you take over power? In this land of Hindutva, the dharma being the fulcrum of it, then Chakravarti Rajagopalacharya suggested, normally the kings used to carry something called a symbol, which reminds of the king the righteous duty that he should always do as a person. Then it was decided that the symbol should be made in Tamil Nadu by one of the Adinam, and the symbol was made in Tamil Nadu by the Dharmapuram Adinam, which was flown in a special plane from Chennai to Delhi, and which was given to Lord Mountbatten, and that was handed over to Chakravarti Rajagopalacharya, when Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and others were there, because they felt that transfer of power is a symbolism that is happening. Now recently, when the 75th year of Independence Day, the celebration was happening, the Adinam people contacted all of us. They said, look, we have given this symbol 75 years back, and Chakravarti Rajagopalacharya flew in a special plane to Delhi. Can you just find out where it is? Because nobody knows where it is. Then an extensive search we have written to all the people concerned. It was conveniently forgotten within a few days of how our country took power from the British in terms of a symbol, the dharma, the root of Hinduism. And that Adinam recently met our Honorable Prime Minister in Varanasi, also as part of the Kasi Tamil Sangh. And especially in Tamil Nadu, when we look at this Adinam, we have about 18 in number. If I take the youngest of Adinam as a sect, it is 800 years old. If I take the senior-most Adinam as an institution, it is 1500 years old. Year after year, if you want to define this Hindutva, the dharma, how people should live, across Tamil Nadu, the 18 Adinams are spread. They were giving us a value system, how a life should be lived, how people should coexist among others. Uninterpreted was done. Then the Britishers came in, they started divide and rule, they got into this paper property, they got into this land division, and the revenue modeling, they started controlling. The message that I'm trying to convey is now when we're talking to the professor, we're talking about how will this disturb the global time. India is acting as a beacon of hope. Not beacon of hope because we are growing as a country 7%, 8%. That is one part of the story. So the other part of the story is we are giving a lot of life lessons to the other parts of the world. How to live a life, how to coexist. That is why in this age of time, December 1 G20 presidency, when our Honorable Prime Minister take over, the theme itself is resonating with what Hindutva is. The theme itself, coexistence in a planet with everybody. And they have made this G20 year of presidency as a very inclusive. Some 190 meetings happening across the country, a small town to a big town, a commoner to a rich man, rich person. Everybody is involved in this G20 thing for the whole year. I think that is a message we have to give. The sense of democracy has to be reinvented. It is not that power for the sake of power. The dharma has to be the root of power. When we put dharma as the root of power, I think all the global problems will be solved. Because you don't take country-wise questions. When you bring dharma into it, you take a position that benefits the humanity as a whole, that benefits everybody as a whole. You talk about international diplomacy, what is it? We say country's interest. When you all take country's interest, then there is no solution for global warming. When you take country's interest, there is no solution for Russia-Ukraine problem. Because country's interest means you start taking extreme position what's used. This is what our Hindutva, India is bringing to the global table, the concept of dharma, the root of power. That is what the symbol was supposed to symbolize. I hope one day when the new parliament gets opened, we will request our argument to make one more symbol. On behalf of Tamil people, we will present it again to the Honorable Prime Minister.
This is a question for you, but this is by Vishnu PR. And he's saying that do you think that the divine feminine is still among all of us to fight for Dharma? So basically kind of asking whether Hindutva is all quality and militarized Hinduism is that possible?
I think the very first effort at survival is through resistance. And I think if you look at our history, the last few thousand years, despite all these challenges, one thing that you find constant is the Hindu has always resisted. And I think that is something that is core to our existence. And I think 2014 and 2014, post 2014, the very fact that today all of us are gathered here, we are discussing, on an issue of this kind. There are multiple new authors who are coming up, who are writing path-breaking works. There's a general rise of consciousness throughout the country with respect to civilizational rejuvenation. I think all of these are very important green shoots that there is a massive resurgence that is taking place, and that the next 25 years that the Prime Minister calls as Amrit Kal is a very important 25 years for this dharmic revival to take place, and it is already happening.
Yes, so that's going for the best, but I think the next 25 years are going to be extremely challenging because when the big changes happen, the big trouble also comes. So I think I want to
add just a line, what you talked about, the so-called international conspiracy and how Hindus are not safe. The answer is that weakness is not respected. Okay? So resistance, organization, alliances, and you see in Bangladesh, for example, an ISKCON priest for a temple was killed. And ISKCON is a very peaceful organization, but they are very well organized in terms of creating awareness because they're spread all over the world. So you need all these different levels of networking and organization with a very active, I would say, diplomatic initiative as well. So we have to come back. See, we have, let's say, Dharma. that alone won't save us. We have to organize that dharma. And we have to resist where it's required. And you mentioned militarize. We don't need to over-militarize because that in the end that destroys you. So you need that balance, right? But as you rightly said, as you rise, everyone wants to cut your feet. Okay? Even Annamalai, there's so many in Tamil Nadu who want to bring him down. In his own party, if I may be allowed to say that. Okay? These are facts. Let's be honest. This is off the record. It's not for public consumption.
But on camera.
But we have to examine ourselves also. So this Sangathan, we need to organize and we need to have alliances. But weakness is not a virtue. This is what I want to say. Strength is a virtue.
I just want to add to what you said, sir. I wanted to make this when Anamalaji was speaking about dharma and the baton that was handed over. Perhaps why it was lost, or rather why it was not given the due respect. I was in Kerala yesterday. One of the Karyakartas there told me that one of the very first things that Pinarayi Vijayan did after coming to power was to issue a government notification banning celebration of Onam and Poovakkam festivals in all government premises and government temples and government offices, which was something that has continued from the time of independence and even before British. One of the reasons why this is done is because we do not see ourselves as a civilizational state. The narrative that India was born on 1947, 15th of August, that a new nation was created with a clean slate, that we don't have a history, that we don't have a millennia-old identity, is something that is a root cause of this kind of a distortion. And now you extend this to international politics. Why did a Dr. Khare, about whom Aravindan ji mentions in this book, why did he take up the fight for the cause of the Hindus, the Indians in South Africa so vociferously, even when we were independent? Because he felt that it was the duty of India and the Indian government to fight for and protect the interests of Hindus living in every part of the world, because we are all united because of a common consciousness and a common worldview and a common culture that we all share. So once India starts identifying itself as a civilizational state, then not only celebrating our cultural practices like say Onam or the Adhinam's symbol, Singam, Dharmadanda, Singol, you start to revere it because it's a part of your civilizational culture. In the same way, the state will then start advocating, protecting the rights of Hindus, whether it's in Malaysia, whether it is in UK or anywhere, because we are all part of the same civilization. So I think that is something that needs to be very clearly articulated as a political narrative that the Indian state must accept.
So basically moving away from the nation-state paradigm to this civilizational state paradigm. And I think that's already happening. You see the rise of China and the rise of India are not just the rise of just another country. They are the rise of completely distinct, different civilizations which are now having a major say on the international space. But I have this question for you, sir. How Hindutva can be used as a tool to abolish hierarchical societal stratification in a modern society. And you also deal with this point in your book when you talk about the forces of social stagnation versus the impulse within Hindu society to keep on reforming and improving upon itself. So could you please elaborate and answer this question by your audience?
The social stratification, particularly birth-based social hierarchies, naturally birth-based social exclusions. These are common to all pre-modern societies. So, we cannot define our culture or our essence through this particular aspect. that we have birth-based social stratification and that defines us. We don't have to say that. It is not true. But what is true is that from the Vedic time, India is the only nation that, irrespective of what was its social or economic condition, has always fought against social stagnation, has always fought against social exclusion. The basis of spirituality. So you have the incident of Kavashaka, you have a lot of social reformers, actually spiritual persons, who have said that these social exclusions are wrong. In no other culture you see that. For example, if you take the Western cultures, all these social exclusions, everything go, because colonialism makes these social exclusions irrelevant. If there had been no colonialism, these social exclusions would have gone unquestioned by the religious structures. Only in India, the religion, spirituality, it has questioned these social exclusions. So this defines Hindutva. The questioning of social exclusions defines Hindutva. Let me put it very clearly in modern terms. Professor Paranjabe talked about a lot of anniversaries that are coming. There is a very important anniversary that is coming. 1923, Sitaram Keshav Bole passed a resolution in Bombay Presidency. This resolution was about the so-called untouchables, the socially excluded communities, using public pathways, using the public parks, using the public water bodies. And it was not implemented, and that was the reason why Dr. Ambedkar started the Magat Satyagraha. So this particular resolution is a very important resolution that created a very important social revolution, social emancipation in India. Who is this Sitaram Keshav Bole? He would become the provincial president of Hindu Mahasabha of Maharashtra. Not only that, he goes and meets Dr. Ambedkar when Ambedkar is going to Constituent Assembly and says to him at the airport that you should pass a resolution that saffron flag, Bhagavad flag should be the national flag of India. So that is Sitaram Keshav Bole. And it was Sitaram Keshav Bole's resolution that actually changed the social consciousness of India towards social emancipation. And he was a Hindutvaite. And 2023, it is the 100 years of Bole resolution. Without Bole resolution, we would not have had a social revolution against untouchability. So, this is the basic contribution of Hindutva. This contribution of Hindutva is natural to it. Remember, none of our great social reformers actually had British education. Sri Narayana Guru, he had traditional education. Ayya Vaikundar, he had traditional education. Dr. Ambedkar very openly states this fact that his impulse for social emancipation comes from his religious instinct. And what was that religious instinct? He was from Kabir Panth. Now we are celebrating Kashi Tamil Sangamam. Now what is Kabir Panth? Who was Kabir's guru? It's Ramananda. Who was Ramananda? He was the disciple of Raghunanda, who was in turn the disciple of Ramanuja, and this comes from Tamil Nadu to Kashi. And from there, it creates the concept of Ambedkar. So here you have the natural Hindutva process across the centuries creating social emancipation. Unfortunately, we give the credit for this to Britishers. Now we have a lot of women here sitting. What was the reason for this? The reason for this is that a law came and that law raised the marriage age of women higher and that stopped child marriage. That is the very fundamental anthropological fact that this rising of the marriage and stopping of the women marriage, child marriage is important for women emancipation. And who achieved that in India? It was Harmilas Sharda. And who was Harmilas Sharda? A strong Hindutvaite. He wrote a book called Supremacy of Hindu Civilization. We have forgotten that. today we are told that Hindutva is an obscurantist, patriarchal, blah 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 ideology. Actually, in India, every real, true social revolution, when it was needed, was created by Hindutva. So that I think I.
I think this question is definitely for you. We are still on the defensive mode. When are we going to go on the offensive? What is our answer to denationalize, demonetize, de-Hinduize? Challenged by your opponent.
I think instead of using the word, have we started to be more offensive, have we started to be more open? As I gave an introduction to Aravindan Neelakandan, it is 75 years of learning has to be, a lot of unlearning has to be done. The institutional capture at different points of time, it has to be taken back. And the so-called scholars, within quotation, they're given a certain pedestal. They were kind of elevated to demigod status, and whatever was written, they say it is from the truth of God has said the truth. So now it's a challenge for us to kind of unlearn it, bring the truth out. So we have started to be offensive, and not necessarily offensive in the sake of the English language translation. The offensive in the sense of the Hindutva part. Because we never talk about offense being going, arguing, debating, and being an offense means. Well, we have our own way of presenting our history, which India is reclaiming it now. Across the world, why the concept of Hindus being attacked, the global anti-Hindu movement being funded by some of the biggest guys in the world? Why? Because they know Napoleon Bonaparte. One of the very famous quote I like about Napoleon Bonaparte is he says, "Allow China to sleep. The moment China wakes up, the world will tremble." I think you can replace the word China by India also. Allow India to sleep. The moment India wakes up, the world will tremble. It is happening now, slowly, steadily. We are reclaiming our voice, we are speaking. Brilliant authors and editors who are sitting here. The research output is coming. So now, the next 10 years, we will see the clash of ideas because we have to confront a lot of other people. The 10 years would be that. Then slowly, steadily, the voice would die down because they can't fight a losing battle. They can't keep selling lies. So I would say it's a matter of time. The tide is turning. I only hope and pray the youngsters who are sitting in this audience because it's very great to see in a cold winter evening. If you look at this, there are some great people sitting in the front row. But when you look at the last row, it is all 22, 23, 25-year-old people who are sitting there on a cold winter Delhi evening. So that shows the tide is turning. Maybe more voices like Aravindan Neelakandan. It's a matter of time.
And that's what I'm trying.
That's what I'm saying.
Another question is also for you because for Tamil Nadu. Do you think that is the time that BJP should go on the offensive or just the government control on the 10% of the
So we have been pretty open as a party. We have challenged the Tamil Nadu government control of temples, especially by using an agency. And we have said whenever BJP is in a position to form power, which it will soon, the first thing BJP as a party would do is take T and HRC out of the equation. Make sure they don't control it. Because it's a long-term view. And more than any other point of time in Tamil Nadu's history, only the last 16 months after DMK has come to power, this has become a big equation now. When Kalinganath Karunanidhi was there in power, he was doing this pitch the baby, rock the cradle kind of experiment. So though the T and HRC was controlling the temple, but it was more like a soft, hard approach and people are not really complaining openly. Now last 16 months you are seeing the age-old, thousands of year-old gold, whichever was stored in temples is being taken out. By a government law, they want to kind of make it into gold bar. And in a 3 lakh crore economy, they want to make some couple of crores by selling that gold in the open market. Then the times, the puja conditions, everything is getting changed. Only in the last 16 months, they have become pretty aggressive. Now, there is a counter voice in Tamil. Media is talking, common man is talking. So it's a matter of time.
It is like the Shishupala's indirect mistake.
Yeah, that is it.
Basically, talk about young people in the audience, and India is a very young country and it's a very young demography. And you are the young member of parliament from, I think, the youngest cities in India. How do you take Hindutva? And you talked about that your incline towards the Hindutva came from your reading of Sita Ramurti, Ramsuru, and other people, Vivekananda. How do you make Hindutva moving for the new generation?
Well, in my interactions with those youngsters who have a misconception of Hindutva, I have realized that the misconception generally is a result of them not exposed to or acquainted with the right kind of literature, and having been subject to an ecosystem and a culture which has constantly given them a distorted version of themselves, their culture and their history. So I think the very first, very encouraging thing that is happening is we are seeing today a lot of young people who are writing about us, about our history, our culture, with the right perspective, with truth being the only, being the center of its integrity. And I think a lot of young people are today reading these things. So we are seeing Vikram Sampath, we are seeing Sai Deepak, we are seeing Aravindan Neelakandan, we are seeing so many efforts that are being made today by a lot of young people who are making this intellectual effort. So I think that is a good encouraging sign. The second thing that I feel where all of us need to do some amount of work is protecting our family system. This may come, this is not something which is purely theoretical or academic in the sense, but if you look at it, the reason why India has remained as an unbroken, uninterrupted civilization despite political shifts that have happened throughout our history is because we have protected the family as the institution for transmission of our culture. And one thing that I noticed of late is that the whole woke culture is threatening the very basis of the family as the institution of India's culture. So, as a young Indian, I would request people of my generation, people of my age, to make every effort to protect this most sacrosanct institution which has kept this country and civilization alive. If our languages have to be protected. I was just a couple of weeks ago in Bangalore. You may know, Anna, there is this restaurant Ballad, which is a very famous, upmarket restaurant. I was talking to, I was having breakfast, and there was a clearly upper middle class family which came and sat next to me, and they were talking. Of course, their language of communication amongst themselves was English. So when one of the parents spoke, and then I spoke to the girl who was sitting, I think she may be 11th or 12th. So I naturally asked her. I specifically spoke in Kannada, and she was answering in English. And then I asked her pointedly why is she not answering in Kannada? So she said, with her ISB school accent in English, she said that I'm not very comfortable with Kannada, and all that. So, and then I asked their parents if they speak Kannada at home. And they said it's difficult because they want the kids to pick up good English, so they also speak English at home. So how will our language survive? And then today I'm meeting so many young people who do not want to get married. So many young people who do not want to settle and raise a family. I mean, this may come as something really, old school, when me saying this. But I think it's the wisdom that is kind of dawning on me that is making me realize that the family is central to transmission of culture, it is also the central aspect as to why even when recession happens around the world, India does not get affected as much as the West, because again it is the family which encourages savings, it encourages protection of each other. It is our biggest social security system. So I think the wokeism of today is threatening the most important institution of Indian culture, which is the family. So in addition to all of these practice, all of these academic works that we are doing, all of the political achievements that we are, proud of, that we are peaking, protecting the Indian family is a very important project that young India must do with its complete heart.
How to make Hindutva cool to the younger generation, just to set the stage. I specifically asked, as Abhinavji pointed out, I wanted Abhinavji to be there. I specifically asked Annamaliji, and he at once said I will come, and Tejas Suryaji also. All these three people. I asked very, very specifically because all these three are the future of India. And all these three people find you should remember that. Not because they are from one political party. I didn't invite them because they are from one political party. Because they are the future of India. Why they are the future of India? Because none of them are using any dynastic power. None of them are using any identity politics. Because of their own merit and because of their own love for the nation they are today, they have become the future of India, the future face of India. If the youths want to be that, then they have to have the passion for Dharma and Rashtra, and that is Hindutva. So this is, I think, the easy way to make Hindutva cool. Just look at Annamaliji, look at Abhinavji, and look at Tejas Suryaji, and you will know that this is how I want to be in my own field. In my own field, I want to be an Annamaliji. Then I had to be a Hindutvaite at heart. That is.
One more point about young and Hindutva. I just missed my flow of thought. Many people who are victims of this misconception of Hindutva think that Hindutva is not cool because Hindutva is exclusivist. So the moment you prove to them that Hindutva is a synonym of plurality and Hindutva means universal acceptance, then they will start seeing Hindutva in a different way. Many think that Hindutva means imposing of a certain dress culture. But when you tell them that if you are a Hindu who is 24 years old in India, you are free to wear what you want. But if you are a 24-year youngster in Iran or Afghanistan, the only choice that you can make is between a black color burqa or a white color burqa and nothing else. If you are a youngster who wants to say study architecture, right? If you want to live in an India which Hindutva has as its primacy, you have freedom to imagine the kind of structure that you want to build. A temple in Kerala is very different from a temple in Karnataka. A temple in Tamil Nadu is very different from a temple in Rajasthan. You don't find this kind of a diversity if you try studying the architecture of the monotheistic religions. The kind of domes you see in Turkey are the same kind of domes you will find in the neighborhood mosque. So, when you tell the youngster that Hindutva is
equally featureless, nothing to see actually.
When you tell the youngster that Hindutva is all inclusive, that Hindutva is not discriminatory, that Hindutva, most importantly, is scientific. The very important point that the book makes, which Annamaliji so very well put when he said that Hindutva is the basis of nature. Why is Hindutva so accepting of all diversity? No two people have the same fingerprints. No two people have the same kind of DNA. Because Hindutva accepts Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram and Swadharma to be different for every single person. So when these are communicated to our young people, they will realize that for the future of the world to be more scientific, more modern, more inclusive, less discriminatory, more egalitarian, the way forward is Hindutva.
Thank you for that. We are running short of time, so I'm going to ask my final question. One of the consistent themes throughout the advocates of Hindutva and the advocates of Hindu Sangathan is that they are haunted by the memory of the third battle of Panipat. That when the time came, despite all the talks, alliances, promises, and everything, the Hindus could not unite and put up a resistance and lost the battle to the alliance of the Islamic principalities. How do you see the future of Hindutva in this regard? So, Makaranji, you go first.
I don't think this one's dead. This is yeah, I don't think the third battle of Panipat features very prominently in the book. But the question is important, and I want to answer it in two different ways, which is that the fight of Sanatan Dharma does not hinge on any one battle. It's an unending struggle, okay? So we cannot pin all our hopes, all our fears, or all our, should I say, despair on just one epochal event. In fact, the third battle of Panipat was not the only one. Even the first battle of Panipat, okay, even the battle of Rana Kumbha against Babur, all of these moments show you how is it that Muhammad Ghazni invaded Somnath so many times, because the other kings let them through. So this requires a lot of reflection. But the one thing I wanted to say about the third battle of Panipat, I mean, the Sikhs were not fighting with the Marathas. The Sikhs were neutral, it would seem. So, you know, these things have to be got into very deeply. And for me, one of the clues is Sri Aurobindo, who says that political unity in India took a long time to evolve. It wasn't that it was never there. But I think this is a time when we've understood how important it is. So that's why the present times are very special. And I want to go back to one thing that Anamalaji said, because I want to listen to the other responses, that you see, please don't underestimate the importance of knowledge. See, we lost all these battles because we were really far back in knowledge, in technology. We didn't pay enough importance. So these defeats are defeats of knowledge as well, including, you know, look at the burning of Nalanda. People in Nalanda should have known when Delhi fell that tomorrow we are going to fall. Within 5 years, the armies had come to Bengal. They said 12 horsemen with Bakhtiyar Khilji's 12 horsemen conquered Bengal. So why did we think that, you know, the loss of Multan was not going to result in the loss of Rameshwara? You know, where indeed Malik Kafur's armies came. So we have to understand this. Why is it that the Shatru Bodh was not there? Okay, and the one thing I want to say, learning and unlearning. Aravindan was mentioning another anniversary. Let's not forget, unlearning and learning. In the Mahar Satyagraha, can anybody in the audience tell me who burned the Manusmriti? Anybody in the audience? Everyone knows about the Mahar Satyagraha of Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar. Who burned the Manusmriti? Sahasrabuddhe, yes, because he's a professor. Shrikant Neelakandan. Neelakant Sahasrabuddhe was a Chitpavan Brahmin. So, the fight against exclusion was also fought by the so-called upper caste. Dayanand Saraswati said that caste by birth is completely against the Shastras. Dayanand Saraswati, Dr. Ambedkar doesn't acknowledge it, but before Ambedkar, Dayanand Saraswati had already said it. So, learning and unlearning are so important. And the misinformation, the campaigns of misinformation, weaponized misinformation. I think the young people today appreciate new knowledge. As a teacher, I can tell you, in JNU. You have to bring new knowledge and role models. Very important to have role models. And the book can be cool if you have good role models. If you don't have role models who are attractive, then young people are not going to go for it. Thank you.
Aravindan sir, you would comment on the future of Hindu Sangham.
I come from Kanyakumari district. So I know exactly how it is to lose the third battle. But you will either have to live a life of dimitude or you will have to get converted. Whether it is religion of peace or whether it is religion of love. That is what you will have to do. So, given this fact, Hindutva, realizing Hindutva explicitly is very important if we are not to lose the third battle of Panipat, which has already happened. And we have to understand that it is not going to again happen like in the second battle of Panipat or the first battle of Panipat happened like in a battleground. It is happening right now in pockets and pockets and pockets. And almost yes, in every home, in every village. I have seen this very clearly. There was a village and I have put it, I have recorded the plight of the Hindus in a particular village in YouTube, and that was in 2009 or 2011. Okay. There was a small village, and in that village, the number of particular religious people of the religion of love people, it was like 25, and that of Hindus was like 28, and then 4 got converted. The next day, the very next day, what happened was the local village deity temple was vandalized. So this battle of Panipat is right now happening. We are just not realizing it. So once we realize it, then we will consolidate. And each one of us will have to become, in the words of Swami Vivekananda, a Guru Gobind Singh. We cannot think about our individual egos. We cannot think about our small little circles of sampradayas. Today we don't need sampradaya acharyas. We need sampradaya acharyas. But right now, the most important thing for this Hindu society is Sangatana acharya. Like Veer Swami. And when we have that and when we unite, then with a vision, we will be able to win these battles wherever they are happening. And remember, the third battle of Panipat is not in the future, it is happening right now. And you have to think of these books as basically guidelines, maps with which you fight this battle.
तेजस्वी जी, एक हिंदू का पर्सनल कंसर्न उसकी नाक के आगे और सामाजिक कंसर्न उसकी जात के आगे नहीं जाता है. Do you see a change in this entire thing?
I think the window that we have now, post 2014, the political scenario in the country, I think it's a very golden opportunity for the Hindu Sanghatan work to flourish. I think the coming days, like Aravindan ji said, the battle is not far away, the battle is happening as we speak. We must realize that the cost that we'll have to pay will be extremely heavy, and the elimination will happen even at our own personal physical levels. That is how serious the challenge will be. I just want to conclude my remarks just by in the afternoon I was telling Madam and I was talking to him. Friends, I was in Kerala yesterday to attend the 23rd death anniversary of one of our Karyakartas, K.T. Jayakrishnan Master. He was the state vice president of the Bharatiya Janata Yuva Morcha, the organization that Abhinav and I are all part of. On a fateful day, December 1st, 1999, Jayakrishnan Master, who was a teacher in a school, was butchered in front of his students even while he was teaching by CPM terrorists, and his body was cut into a few pieces. From that day to this day, Hundreds of such karyakartas have been killed in Kerala, not just by the communist terrorists, but also by the Islamic terrorists. Yesterday I went and visited 15 to 20 of our karyakartas who have been put in the district jail as under trials for more than 9 to 10 months on frivolous, falsely fabricated charges because they were offering some resistance on the ground. The lower judiciary is completely politicized, so their bail applications are not granted. The conditions in the jail will make you cry. I met a few of our karyakartas in the central jail who have been convicted, again based on FIRs that were drafted in police stations on the orders and the direction of certain CPM cadres. A 25-26-year-old of our karyakarta from Yuva Morcha, I asked him how many years have you completed? He said 2. How many more do you have? He said 14. Because the police is politicized, the lower judiciary is politicized, and there is an existential threat to your physical person, which is very real. And this is not somewhere in Kashmir, this is not somewhere in some remote part of India that I am speaking of, this is in heartland Kerala. This is how serious the issue is. If we choose to sleep and if we choose to think that the problem is very far away and that it will not touch us, even God cannot protect you. I can only say this, Abhinavji. The Hindu must realize that it is imperative for his physical existence to have political power, because the state is the last vanguard, the last sort of protector for the Hindu. The Hindu must also realize that it is very important to dispel and rebut narratives of this kind, but because at the end of the day, politics is nothing but a battle of narratives. So that is where works of this kind, academic scholars like Parandapeji, like Aravindan Ji come. The Hindu must also at the personal level realize that it is very important to protect the institution of his family, speak his language, celebrate his festivals, and ensure that this generation and the next generation does not become rootless wokes. Because a woke can offer resistance neither at the intellectual level nor at the physical level. Thank you.
In the medieval ages, people don't realize that the Bhakti movement started with Tamil Nadu, that the grand revival of Hinduism started from Tamil Nadu. Do you think that the Tamil people will show the way going forward? Will Tamil Nadu become the fortress of Hindutva?
Abhinavji, I keep telling this openly. We want our country to be the Vishwaguru of the world. Because we believe the time is right. And everybody is looking at us as a country now, at least in a moral way. For India to be the Vishwaguru of the world, I certainly believe Tamil Nadu has to be the Vishwaguru of India. I'm not making this statement very lightly. Since I come from Tamil Nadu, I want to just give a very political statement and get some brownie points. That is not the intention, sir. Now, for things to revive, since Tejasvi and Professor Aravindan brilliantly put it, if you look at our top icons now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in every single field when we take it, in at least the Instagram generation in the 21st century when we take it, you see the social icons, the followers, the fan following base and everything you see. And you take a person like Sridhar Vebu, I'm just bringing one example here. Sridhar Vebu is an entrepreneur from Tamil Nadu, a so-called dollar billionaire. Lived in California for a long time, founder of Zoho. Recently, I happened to see Sridhar Vemuji, in his village. You should see the way he lives his life in his village. He teaches kids. He teaches them Tamil. He runs a small school. He lives in his old village house there. Sometimes in the Zoom call, if the current is gone, the Zoom call will get cut. It is not that he can put a power plant generator in his own village if he wants. But he is a classic definition of a Hindu. Classic definition. Who is very conscious of any of the resources consumed. Very conscious. Very conscious what is the footprint he wants to give. Very conscious to generate the economic revival in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 kind of cities. Because sometimes symbolism do matter. But unfortunately, we haven't made them as our national icons. The younger generation hasn't seen them as great social icons. Many times people question me, why should Narendra Modi ji as a Prime Minister go and do a puja in some temple? And why should the media show light? This is against the secular fabric of our nation. I saw some Tamil debate recently happening, where 3-4 fellows were sitting in a studio, they were having this debate. This is against the ethos of our nation. It is right, the Prime Minister has to do that, and the so-called personal and professional doesn't matter because he is sending a signal to all the people out there to say, if you want the Sanatana Dharma to prosper more, you have to follow a certain way of life. As a Prime Minister is leading that effort, it is not that he wants to do it to get a brownie point. Sridhar Vembu is doing it because for Sanatana Dharma to prosper, we got to unlearn, get ourselves de-addicted from a lot of things which the Western civilization has preached us. Living a life of means that is fully within your control. Be conscious of nature. Be conscious of your consumption. Because the Bhakti movement, the essential revival of Hinduism happened because when something becomes too much for us to digest, this movement spring up. So I believe Tamil Nadu can be the source from which many of this can spring up. 21st century, I can't give you an equivalent of Bhakti movement, but the equivalent would be people like Sridhar Vembu. The equivalent would be somebody practicing Sanatana Dharma, but unfortunately, these people don't come and put a selfie. Sridhar Vembu doesn't put an Instagram selfie and say, see, I'm reviving Sanatana Dharma in Tenkasi village. But somehow we have to go dig them. They don't come out and speak. That is like RSS organization. They don't have a spokesperson coming up and daily going to a TV debate and say, see what we do across India, see what we do across the world. Sometimes speaking less becomes a big disadvantage to us. So I think rightly put, the youngsters have to keep searching for their icons, find the true people who believe in the core essence of life, maybe evaluate them, idealize them, start living a life of full worthiness. When we do it, Hindutva will automatically do absolutely. No need to follow some big guys and keep doing what they do. That is my humble submission to this also.
So, the question about Tamil Nadu, I want to add another one thing. When I was a young, small boy, I got this Amashitra Kada on Lalita, and I will never forget that cover. The cover shows Lalita taking a spear and attacking a rock, a big rock. The story is that they got lost in a desert and there was this rock and Lalita destroyed that rock and then the water came from inside and it made the desert into a beautiful place. Whenever I look at Tamil Nadu scenario, I always used to think that this big Dravidianist rock is sitting on this. And if this rock is broken, Tamil Nadu will be a greater Hindu than and I have always looked, whenever I looked at that cover, I have always looked at only the rock. Now I am looking at Lalita.
This discussion should also come to an end, and I thank Annamalai sir for his time and his commitment to the cause. I thank Tejasvi ji. He was in Kerala yesterday. He came back today afternoon and is flying back at 8:30, 8:40 something. And he came to Delhi only for his book launch. Thank you for your commitment and for your time. Professor Karanchpe, thank you for the good fight you were fighting in JNU. Now I have left you, but you're still there. So, best of luck to you. And our eternal thanks to you for writing this wonderful book. publisher, for organizing this entire session. Over to you.
And thank you for Abhinav for moderating this session so well. And as an Adhyaksh, there is nothing more that I can be proud of than having intellectual stalwarts like him in my team. Abhinav ji is one of the most brilliant young minds that we have who can articulate our cause in the most precise and most respectable fashion. So thank you so much, Abhinav.
I was supposed to request Abhinavji to conduct the session. I couldn't, so at least I can thank you, sir, for conducting this session, as Suryaji said. This was indeed a very stimulating and an ingenious panel discussion here by all the panelists. And also thank you, audience, for such an overwhelming influx of questions from all of you for the panel here. And on this note, I would request Anubhav Chakravarti to come on stage for the thank you note. Anubhav Chakravarti is the Executive Director at the BluOne Group of Companies.
Namaste. To start with, I would like to thank Tejasvi Suryaji, Makaranji, the author Aravindan ji, and of course the moderator Abhinav ji for enlightening us with this insightful panel discussion discussing the book Hindutva, Origin, Evolution and the Future. I'm sure that this thought-provoking discussion has undoubtedly made us contemplate the ideas of Hindutva and that have remained unexplored by many of us here. Thus, after this discussion, I would like to be as brief as possible, and I would like to mention that Aravindan ji deserves our sincere gratitude and thanks for exploring in depth a very important philosophy that is sometimes not understood in its entirety. When the publishing industry was going through one of the most challenging times, we chose to start yet another publishing house. Thus, as a representative of the BluOne Group in general, and BluOne Ink in particular, it becomes essential for me to share with you the kind of publication that we are very briefly and not take too much time. As publishers and promoters of high quality and conscious literature, we aim to bring depth and truth to political life, culture, business, education, and human relationships that embody the philosophy of freedom of expression, irrespective of ideologies. As our mentor Arthur points out, BluOne Ink should be a platform for literature that envisions to change the narrative and create a new narrative, compelling and powerful enough to catch the imagination of the young, without politicizing or polluting the mind, keeping it pure through debate and through rationality. To create this, we need revolutionary ideas, revolutionary work, the kind that we are discussing today, and thus to us, BluOne Ink doesn't stand as yet another publishing house, but a conscious art. I would like to thank everybody from the BluOne Ink team for whose efforts of coordination, collaboration has made the book and this event possible and come to fruition. This wouldn't have been possible without their dedication and diligent work. Thank you guys. I would also like to extend my appreciation to the Constitution Club of India team for the diligence and rigor in making this event possible. And finally, I thank the audience here for making today's event an incredible success. Thank you guys.